Well, welcome again to our Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce Focus Friday. It's an all virtual program today, and we have a fantastic speaker, Paul Shumaker, who Jeff Tarte will introduce in just a minute. Focus Friday is sponsored by Novant Huntersville Medical Center. We have Nicole Burton on the line. And Nicole, would you share a little bit about what's going on with Novant?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Again, Nicole Burton, Guest Experience Operations Manager at Novant. At the hospital, currently, we are experiencing a busy trend here for August. Um, there's no specific grouping of illnesses or diagnosis, just an increased number in volumes regarding patient care. So we're excited to see that volume coming in, and we'll be, tracking that as we roll into our respiratory virus season. Also, Bill, I wanted to mention to this group as well that, as I mentioned before on past calls, on behalf of Mike Riley, our president and CEO of Novant Health, Huntersville Medical Center, and his team, we would like to welcome the Huntersville and Lake Norman community to join us as we celebrate our 20-year anniversary.
Oh,
We're
wow.
very excited about that. That is coming up, save the date, Saturday, November the 2nd. This will be a community event. I will provide more details regarding that, but it will be a good opportunity for our community to come onto the campus and interact with our team members. So we're really looking forward to opening the doors of the hospital and having some things right on campus. So thank you for the time talking about our hospital. Always excited to do that. That's all I got for you today, Bill.
Nicole, I still have my shovel over here. It says Presbyterian, but that dates me. I still have my shovel when we broke ground on the hospital. I
Wow.
remember all the certificates of need hearings that we went through. It was years in the making, but gosh, that's exciting. 20 years.
20 years. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. We're really excited about that.
Well, and we also appreciate Novant. Not only are you the presenting sponsor of this event, presenting sponsor of both Junior Leadership Lake Norman and Leadership Lake Norman, both of which will be kicking off next month, and our golf tournament coming up in October. Novant is the presenting sponsor of the golf tournament. So all of that information is on our website, but we really appreciate your involvement in our community.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, our 2024 board chair is subbing for our public policy chair, Ms. Cashin. Beth is out today. She is doing some stuff, I think, with family. So, Jeff, you want to introduce our speaker?
I will. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Nicole, for Novant sponsorship. Just going to say as a sidebar, that's not a purple sign that's behind him. That's an aubergine. So it's a very specific.
Exactly. You're exactly right.
Anyway, I have the pleasure to introduce our speaker today. And in full disclosure, personal friend, somebody I've worked closely with, somebody I have implicit trust in, brilliant strategist, data analyst, who's recognized not just throughout the Southeast, but nationally as an expert in the political field and realm. Helps candidates at the highest levels, governors, U.S. senators across the region, has contacts in the highest levels of Washington, D.C., and in the media around the country. It's somebody a lot of people lean into for expert advice. And the thing I'm most excited, one thing that Paul had mentioned he's going to be able to share with us is he's got recent polling data. And polling data different than, okay, who's winning by 2% or 4%, but detailed data analysis on the issues, what the public are saying are the things that are important to us as voters, and what the candidates need to be paying attention to. So with that, I'm going to give the floor to you, Paul, and we're excited to have you here.
Great, Jeff, and appreciate having the opportunity to be back. I guess everybody can hear me okay, so we're all good on the technology side of this. What I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about North Carolina landscape, some registration trend data first, because it's important to understand what's taking place in our state. Because unfortunately, and I deal with reporters across and a lot of other political analysts on a daily basis, is that we have a tendency to want to look at our state as far as the past, and we look at history, and history is important. But at the same time, I think we have to look at where we are going and have some understanding to that. So here's a couple of things that are taking place. Went back and looked at the last 10 years in North Carolina on registration trend. data. And so if you look at those 10-year period of time, we've had 33 counties that has lost voter registration during that period of time. We've had 44 counties that had a gain of between 1 and 10,000 new voters. So we have a net total of 77 counties there. So Wake County or Mecklenburg County, and being the North Mecklenburg, being the Lake Norman Chamber, you're very familiar with North Mecklenburg and Mecklenburg County. Wake County or Mecklenburg County during those 10 years added more new voters than those 77 counties combined together. Wake or Mecklenburg, not Wake and Mecklenburg. We have 9 counties that have added between 10 and 20,000 new voters. Wake or Mecklenburg added more new voters than those 9 counties did as well. In fact, if you take the top 80, if you take the bottom 88 counties in North Carolina, Wake and Mecklenburg added more new voters in the last 10 years than 88 counties combined together. We have 10 counties that have added between 20 and 40,000 new voters. Wake and Mecklenburg added more new voters than those 10 counties did combined together. In fact, Wake and Mecklenburg make up almost a little over 40% of all new voter registration growth in the state in the last 10 years. And so, as I told Congressman Chuck Edwards up in the mountains, who's in Henderson County, when I got in politics, was one of the top Big 10 counties in this state. Wake County and Mecklenburg County will add more new voters in the next 3 months than that county will add in the next 10 years. So it gives you an implication of the shift that's taking place to the suburban urban. And that's very important on the trend line data. The other thing is that growth is accelerating. Wake and Mecklenburg over the last 10 years have added 74 new voters a day, 365 days out of the year, 10 days, 10 years for 10 years. If you look at the last 4 years, Wake and Mecklenburg is now adding over 90 new voters a day. That trend line has accelerated from that standpoint. Also, one of the things that's taking place is that you continue to have Democratic ballot voter registration erosion. That has been a 10-year trend. And so not to let everybody know, I'm not anything I say here, I stand by. At the same time, I'm not going to give you a partisan spin or a partisan twist. I'm a messenger of numbers. Keep in mind, we had ballot registration erosion for the Republicans in the previous decade. That was taking place. And that Democratic erosion is a reflection of sort of where the state of the parties are. And I'll hit on that in 1 second. But so to put that into perspective, is that by the 2026 general election cycle, the way this state is going to look, it's going to be 30% Republican, 30% Democratic, and 40% unaffiliated. Right now, there's a net gain. Democrats are losing an average of 4,000 voters a month over the last 2 years. That's 24-month trend data. Republicans have added about 2,000 a month, 24-month trend data, not 24 years, 24 months. And then unaffiliated are adding about an average of 10,000 a month to that line. And so Republicans are basically treading water. Democrats are eroding, and unaffiliated continue to be where the real gain is. So let's talk about the state of the two parties real quick, because that's important to understand what's taking place on the presidential race, particularly on the Democratic side of the equation. If you look at the Democratic Party, the battle in the Democratic Party today is not a battle between a moderate wing of the party and a liberal wing of the party. That battle is over. There's very few moderate Democrats left. The Democratic Party continues to make a march to the left. 30 years ago in this state, Democratic Party was 30 points right of center on average. Today in North Carolina, they're almost 45 points left of center, and they can continue to go to the left. The fight in the Democratic Party, and we saw this play out in the presidential race, it's the fight between the liberal wing of the party and the radical wing of the party. You saw that play out with protests about the Hamas and Israel play out on the campuses. You hear that today if you go look at Politico or The Hill. There's already a press on Kamala Harris from the radical, or they'll call it the progressives, but I'll call it the radical wing of the party, to already put pressure on her because of some of the people she's reaching out to in the major donor world. That is the fight within the Democratic Party. Joe Biden represented the old party. Kamala Harris, quite frankly, is more reflective of where the Democratic Party is today ideologically than where Joe Biden was. On the Republican side, the fight the Republican Party is the fight between the country Republican and the country club Republican. You can call it the business or the rural. I find it very interesting because Donald Trump is the leader of the party. This is the guy who lives at a country club, owns a country club, but his strength is in the country Republicans, not the country club Republicans. And then you got the unaffiliateds, and here's the thing that's taking place with the unaffiliateds, and they are the largest single voting bloc of this state. They make up 37% of all voters today. Unaffiliateds are a right of center group. More unaffiliated identify themselves as conservative than a moderate or a liberal. In fact, it's 2-to-1 conservative over liberal, so it's a 20-point right of center voting group. However, that their definition of conservatism is different than the historic definition Republicans may look at conservatives or conservatives in North Carolina. They are not Bible Belt conservatives. They are four-year college educated, which Republicans have a problem with. They tend to be higher educated, higher income earners, and they're more mobile and they see North Carolina as a stopping place throughout their career. They don't necessarily see it at the end of their career or the destination point. So those are the trends that's taking place. The other thing is that during that period of time, if you look at the 10-year trends, Republican candidate performance, and I'll play this out because of challenges I have in races I'll be currently handling and will handle in the future, is that if you look at the areas that are growing the slowest, the 77 counties I talked about, the 33 and then the 44, Republican ballot performance has continued to increase every election year in the U.S. Senate, in the presidential, and the gubernatorial races. The one exception in 2020, the Dan Forest race, he didn't improve performance there. He stayed static to the 2016 gubernatorial race. But Thom Tillis and Donald Trump both did better in 2020 in those areas than Mitt Romney or in the 2016 with Burr and Trump on the ballot. In the areas that are the 9 counties I call sort of the sweet spot stable, there has been no shift in ballot performance by either side during that 10-year period of time. However, in the 12-county cluster that's growing the quickest in North Carolina, Democrat ballot performance is improving while Republican ballot performance is decreasing. And in fact, even between 2020 and 2022, Ted Budd did about a half a percentage point worse in those areas than what Thom Tillis had done in 2020 percentage wise. So, well, Republicans have got a challenge of having to offset erosions in the rural and the suburban urban areas. Democrats' challenge is not really looking at the fight in rural areas, in my opinion, because those numbers are getting smaller. They need to learn they're going to have to try to increase their performance in the suburban urban areas, and they have the opportunity to do so, but it's a high swing, high competitive area. But that makes it fascinating. So the other side of it is that the tipping point. There is no North Carolina is a purple state. I will not say we're a purple state trending blue. I'll actually say we're a purple state trending more purple. And 8 years ago, I would have told you that I thought the tipping point would be about 20 years out. I would tell you now I don't see a tipping point just because the dynamics of the unaffiliated. They don't like candidates. They don't like politicians. They don't like political parties. They're up for grabs, and they are really becoming the center of this state. So our politics is going to start to look more like New England and New Hampshire and Maine as we get into the future. It's going to be able to be competitive. It may lean one way or the other, they can still remain competitive for both sides. All right. Any questions to date on that? That's sort of my landscape set here.
Yeah, Paul, why don't we let you go through, because
okay,
if we start asking questions there, we'll never.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Let me hop into the presidential state of the presidential race right now and everything else. First thing is I'm going to talk a little bit about polling because y'all are going to be inundated with polls. You're going to read about polls. The major poll trending in the last 48 hours nationally was the Cook political report. Charlie Cook is probably the most respected political analyst in the country on both sides. He is right more so than anyone else has been in predicting outcomes in congressional races and also on presidential. The Cook political report polling in the 7 battleground states had Kamala Harris +1 in North Carolina. I went through and looked at that. So here's the thing. The poll is correct from that standpoint. However, that's not reflective of the actual ballot test here. And when I say the poll is correct, first of all, what you got to look for if you're looking at any polling data, you need to know what N equals because N will determine what the margin of error is. And in the Cook political report, out of the 2,700 interviews they did in 7 states, they interviewed 411 people in North Carolina. So that means you have a margin of error in those 411 people of 5. So that race could be plus or it could be -4. That's how that margin of error breaks out. Also, you need to know that when you have smaller sampling sizes in a state like North Carolina, you tend to have an overrepresentation of the suburban urban area. That's just the nature of the polling process. In Thom Tillis, his first U.S. Senate race in 2014, we were consistently underperforming in our poll numbers. And I looked at the data, and where we were underperforming in rural areas where we should have been doing better. And so we started oversampling. We increased our sample size to get more interviews. And all of a sudden, we had an equilibrium effect take place. And we improved our standing, not from a standpoint of doing better. It's just that we had a better representative sample to the extent today in a state like North Carolina, you really need a minimum of 800, 600. Polling is very expensive. I just finished up an N equals 800, which I'll talk about. I'm getting ready to go back into the field with a data model in 2 weeks, and we're doing 2,000 interviews. That's just the reality of that process. I share that with you as a lead in here to say that if you look at any of these polling data, first of all, you need to know what N equals. That is going to give you a little bit better insight into how valid that one number is. Secondly, is that where I've got the race right now is I got the race a +4 Trump. That's based off of N equals 800. Keep in mind, I got a margin of error of 3, so it could easily be a Trump +1 from that standpoint. Now, here's how this plays out. First of all, Kamala Harris has fixed the Democratic Party turnout problem. She's fixed it in North Carolina. She's fixed it nationally. When you look at the partisan breaks between, I'm not going to go into the actual granular detail of the actual numbers because it's somewhat proprietary. I can talk about it in a macro sense, but if you look at the partisan break of favorable, unfavorable of the two candidates, if you look at Kamala Harris and you look at her number with Republicans, 5% of Republicans are favorable to her. About 90% of Republicans are unfavorable. Okay. When you look at the Democratic vote, the Democrat registered Democrats, they're 90% favorable to her and they're 5% unfavorable to her. So she has solidified that. If you look at Donald Trump with Republicans, he's 90% favorable and he's about 6% unfavorable. His numbers are very much numbers within her own party, with his party. If you look at Democrats, he's 5% favorable, he's 90% unfavorable. One of the things that we need to understand, and you hear in the media, they talk about the polarization of American politics. And they talk about why can't the people in Congress, why can't one side come across and with the other side, and why can't they work things out? Understand the voting electorate of the two political parties are highly polarized. That is who they are. And that is where the elected leadership comes out of those two groups. They're highly polarized. And you see that polarization there. There will be less crossover voting in this state in 2024 than ever before in the history. Now, we'll talk about ticket splitters, but the ticket splitters are not Republicans, soft Republicans, and they're not conservative Democrats. They are unaffiliated. And so then when you look at the unaffiliated numbers, what you will find is that Donald Trump is 1-to-1. His favorable unfavorable ratio is 1-to-1. It's about like 47-47. Kamala Harris has got a problem with unaffiliated right now, and that is her unfavorables are at 55 and her favorables are at 35. She's net -20 with unaffiliated. And what's driving that are two issue sets: the economy and the border, immigration. And I say that, and I was actually telling the New York Times, talking to a New York Times reporter about the problem. And here she's coming to Raleigh today to talk about the economy. They've got an economy problem there. Now, when you look at the overall ballot performance and everything, right now, Trump is winning unaffiliated, and that is the difference in the margin here. However, don't take that as a predictor. The unaffiliated voters are swing voters, and they have no loyalty to a party, and they have no loyalty to a candidate. They can change in a week's notice, and they can totally flip a race. I can actually tell you, in John Bradford, one of his state house races, he was losing unaffiliated by 13 points, and he was down 10 points overall 4 weeks out. He ended up winning by 13 points. And what we did was I told John, I said, look, the unaffiliated think your opponent's an independent. We got to make him a liberal Democrat. If we do that, you win. And that's what we did. Same thing true with Thom Tillis and Cal Cunningham. You know, we were underwater until the scandal broke. The unaffiliated split. It wasn't Democrats. It wasn't Republicans coming home. It's all unaffiliated. And So we're unaffiliated, and then the other key group is we're white suburban women. Now, the reason why I say white suburban women is that overwhelmingly in the numbers, African American, Black women vote Democratic. You have to break out, and Republicans to win statewide, Republicans have to break even with white female voters across the whole state. And white suburban women, because of the increase there, they become very important. You have heard terms in the past about security moms, soccer moms. That's who they're talking about. Right now, Harris is losing those voters, and Trump is winning with those voters, even though they don't like him. And that's the key point here. Harris has got the leg. The problem for Harris is, and this is the way I look at the presidential race between Trump and Harris. North Carolina can be competitive for the Democrats, but the bar is much higher for Kamala Harris in North Carolina than it is for Donald Trump. And here's the reason why. It's because Kamala Harris has to come to this state and say, look, you may not like what we've done in the last 4 years, but trust me at my words that we're going to make it better the next 4 years. Whereas Donald Trump can come to it and say, look, you may not like the way I talk, you may not like the way I act, but look at my record and what I did. And I fixed it once and I can fix it again. And the one thing that Trump has going for him, pre-COVID, our economy was rocking. I mean, I still think back, we had a poll in January of 2020 before COVID in the Tillis race. Trump was plus 6.5 in this state. Donald Trump was plus 5. We normally never ever get numbers like that. Very few undecideds, and then the undecideds overwhelmingly leaned our way into that. COVID changed that dynamic and reset that a little bit. Now, with that said, I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Frank Luntz, but Frank Luntz is a national pollster, respect a lot. He was on CNN this morning. And Frank Luntz actually is, I want to paraphrase, you go back and probably find it online to look at what he said. But he was talking about the challenges for Harris is going to be on the economy, is going to be on immigration. Very much so what I've just mirrored here and what we're seeing in the numbers. And he said the challenge for Trump's going to be his behavior and for the people around him, because he said the women are going to determine the outcome here, and they get fed up with his behavior. And the line he used, he said Donald Trump reminds them of either their first husband or the divorce lawyer that they had to deal with in their first marriage. And so I thought that was it was interesting the way he said that and put that into place. All right, I want to shift over to the governor's race real quick. The Cook Political Report had the governor's race going from a dead even to a +8. Right now, the governor's race is about a +4 for Josh Stein. The key takeaway in the numbers that I'm looking at, and this is a trend that I saw it start to emerge literally in the 2020 cycle, but really in 2022, and it's even accelerated into the 2024 cycle. That is, first of all, the key takeaway is that if you're outside of the Raleigh market, over half the voters have no opinion or never heard of Josh Stein. Now, he is +4 points. He has no image issue definition. People vote based upon their opinions of the candidates. If you're in Raleigh market, 65% have an opinion or heard of him, 35% have not. And keep in mind, it's been well over 20+ million, already about 30+ million spent there. And the key, when I say that's the key takeaway, is that coming out of 2022, and my friends at Spectrum Media hates to hear me say this, and I actually met with them after the 2022 cycle because I bought less cable television in 2022, is I came out of the opinion out of 2022 cycle, cable TV's dead as it relates to advertising. It no longer allows you to drive a message. And to that point, so in 2024, I had bought 0 cable TV to this date. And I'm a person who usually spends a few $1 million every election cycle on cable television. I have bought 0 cable television for my client because I see no return on that. The key takeaway now is I see traditional broadcast media is on the way out the door. And there's going to have to be, this was the point, Bill, I was talking about earlier before we got onto this, is one of the key takeaways is that in American politics, we look at the money, we look at the spend, we look at this narrative based upon the traditions of the past. We got to realize the voting public is now receiving their information totally different, and they're not receiving that through traditional filters, media filters. By that, I'm talking about, the Charlotte Observer. I'm talking about, WSOC or WBTV if you're in the Charlotte market, WRL if you're in the Raleigh market. They're not receiving their information, and the financial models of that is for the political races candidates is that they have a contribution limit set that, quite frankly, the dollars that they go spend with the broadcast advertisers, they are charging us more and more every 2 years, and they're giving us less and less reach. And that's the interesting takeaway within the governor's race. And here's why I say that can be very important, because if that narrative does not change, then what you have the potential is to start to see major races like that start to play out. Is that the outcomes are determined by the overall environment created at the top of the ticket. And so then therefore it becomes I'm going this way, let's just keep going this way all the way down the ballot. And so being able to communicate that information. So now with that said, Mark Robinson is better known. 25% of voters statewide have no opinion, never heard of the guy. Now, unfortunately for Mark Robinson, he is better known for the wrong reasons. Whereas Josh Stein is plus positive around 13 on his image, Mark Robbins is net negative 10 statewide on his image. Most importantly is that the Stein campaign or other third-party groups have done a good job in defining him with suburban women. Josh Stein is winning suburban women by double-digit numbers. He is much stronger. In fact, he is underperforming with his party intensity vote. Mark Robinson is underperforming with his party intensity vote. The whole strength right now of the Stein campaign is based upon suburban female voters. He is doing exceptionally well with that voting group. And that's the narrative they have to change. If you look at the voting ballots, for instance, if you're a Republican running statewide, you have to get 90% of the registered Republican Party vote in a poll to be in a position to build a winning coalition. If you're getting less than 90%, you cannot mathematically build a winning coalition. Donald Trump today is at 89% of his party vote. Mark Robinson is only at 70% of the party vote. So he has not solidified the Republican base as well. And so that becomes a problem for him. Whereas Josh Stein, now keep in mind, the Republicans will come home to Robinson because there's going to be less crossover voting. I've already talked about that. But as far as right now, the intensity gap, there's not that intensity for him. There's strong intensity for Trump. There's also strong intensity for Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket. Stein and Robinson will benefit by that intensity being down ballot races. Real quickly, shift gear to other down ballot races, everything else. The generic ballot, first of all, just about every down ballot candidate is tracking about +2, +3 on the Republican side. Keeping in mind, unaffiliated are almost the same number as the votes they're getting. It's about a third, a third, a third. I mean, it's like 36 to 34, 36, 33, and the rest are undecided. That's because there is no definition of the down ballot candidates. The generic ballot test is tracking +3 Republicans statewide. That is quite frankly, is a little bit stronger than normal. And this should be a concerning part for Democrats. And the reason why it's a little bit stronger than normal is that the generic ballot test is stronger with unaffiliated on the Republican side than it normally is. It actually looks more like 2014, 2010. If you go back and look at data where unaffiliated were overwhelmingly breaking for Republicans, that environment is still there, and it is driven by the economy and it's driven by the border. And when I say it's about the border, it's not anti-immigration. It's about security. It's about fentanyl. There's a whole cadre of problems. It's about national security. It's about fentanyl. It's also about enforcing the law. And so there's a whole cadre of issues that come up with that. Right now, and also the thing is that unaffiliated are trending a little bit more conservative than what they normally have in the past. And it's about economic conservatism. It's not social conservatism, which, from Trump's standpoint, he's playing the economic message, everything else. Robinson is getting clobbered with the social. That's why he's underperforming with unaffiliated as well, because they are not social conservatives or economic conservatives. So that's sort of it in a nutshell. I'll be glad to throw it open and take questions.
You get primarily me, Paul, but if anybody has questions, if you want to throw something into the chat, we'll make sure we funnel them. But let's start with where you ended. So where are voters getting their information if it's not traditional broadcast and cable TV?
Facebook, Twitter, YouTube,
Social media.
and it's not from vetted media outlets. I mean,
So
in
it may
fact,
not be accurate information they're getting, they're using.
well, if go look at the U.S. Olympics and look at the lady who's the athlete who's supposed to be a transgender boxer. You know, that quite frankly, the foundation of that was all driven by social media, and traditional media outlets picked it up, actually ran stories about it, but then they didn't go back and correct themselves when the facts were actually told there. And it's just another, and that is a problem. That is a problem for all political candidates because, you know, you voters have got to sort through what is reality and what is not. Now, here's the thing about that politically. I've seen this in focus groups. Behavior. I mean, Republicans have registered Republicans have almost a preset die cast behavior mode when it comes to the elections. Democrats are the same way. I said of less crossover voting today. And that is the trend because when I say less crossover, understand the parties have gotten smaller. I mean, one of the things I didn't mention, but the trend line continued by 2026, Republicans are going to outnumber Democrats in this state. It's not going to be a great number. It's not going to be a number you can bake on because both sides are going to have less of the market share. And I put this in terms of business. I mean, think about if you're an investor and you got three choices in front of you. And two of those choices are companies that have spent billions of dollars in advertising and billions of dollars of selling their products, and they're losing a market share. And you got another company over here that spends zero on advertising, and they're gaining, and they're growing exponentially. Where do you put your money? And so these unaffiliated voters, and when I look at Republicans, this is the biggest challenge for Republicans moving forward, in my opinion, is that they have got to fix their education gap problem with four-year college graduates. If you're a four-year college degree or higher, we have a brand image problem. Now, I'll give you the example within the numbers. I say that. If I look at the generic ballot with college graduates in North Carolina, it is a +8 Democratic advantage with college graduates. If I look at the ideological ballot with college graduates, it's a +10 conservative advantage. But it's economic conservatism. And so what it is that they lean to the right, but they embrace a different brand. And you got to look at the hierarchy of need when you look at these voters. We tend to look at the world, y'all probably figure out I try to look at the world a little bit differently. You got to look at the hierarchy of need of these voters. And when you look at that path of these swing voters in North Carolina, their lifestyle choices are not going to the grocery store and deciding what products they buy or not buy. Their grocery store needs met's already done. Their lifestyle choices when it comes to the economic downturn is going to be, okay, do we take a vacation here in America somewhere instead of going overseas on a European vacation? It's a different lifestyle choice. And I'll give you an example. In one of the focus groups we were doing one time, we were talking to unaffiliated women. We had a lady who was a business owner, and she had voted for Donald Trump in 2016. She was voting for Joe Biden in 2020. Her husband owned his own business. And she was saying there's no way I can vote for Trump because the way talking about his behavior and everything else. And our facilitator for the focus group said, but you know, you said you voted for Trump because he was a businessman. You said you voted for Trump because of what he would do for business. You're a business owner yourself. If Joe Biden's elected president, he's going to implement policies that will most likely hurt your business. And her response was, first of all, I started my business when Barack Obama was president of the United States. And I was told that the sky was going to fall then, and it didn't fall. My husband's been in business much longer than I have. When we have these downturns, we're not hurt. Our employees are hurt, but we're able to make adjustments. And that comes back into those hierarchy of needs. Understand these voters will look to make adjustments. And they're going to make the determination, Jeff, of who actually wins and loses moving into this state down the road. So the R's and the D's, they get it within that. These unaffiliated voters I'm talking about, they actually go out and search. They go out and look. And so campaigns and companies, we have to go out there and provide more content for them to find to help make our case.
So two things. First of all, is the rule of the political party over, and it is the unaffiliated, educated, doing their homework voter that's going to decide the races in the future?
Well, the role of the political parties is that here's the thing: is that the question is going to be do unaffiliate. If you look at some of the Meredith University had a poll out last year where a majority of unaffiliated voters did not even know they're eligible to vote in primaries. The fact of the matter is both sides need to be looking to encourage and bringing unaffiliated voters into the primary processes for a very simple reason. They need to have a product that they're able to better sell when it comes to general election voters. So both sides, even though they're getting smaller, there's a potential primary pool for both political parties in excess of 4 million voters that could participate in their primaries. So, in the 2024 primary, we had about 1 million on the Republican side. You had about 700,000 on the Democratic side. And so you've got 75% of the marketplace not participating in the primary process. What keeps the political parties relevant in the two major party system? Understand our country didn't have a two-party system until we came into the post-Civil War era. And it's now been codified into election laws. What keeps the two-party system relevant is how we handle money in American politics. It's the financial transactions and the advantages that the party brings into place. Right now, the current system, if it continues, and also in the decline of the media, what we have is a system that's only going to empower third-party groups with less transparency to be the ones who dominate the rule and drive the agenda from that standpoint. And from a guy, and look, I benefit from third-party world and everything else. Yeah, but that is endemic of the system. And I made a reference to the campaign contribution limits. Is that what it is? A campaign contribution limit puts a ceiling on what campaigns can do, and that ceiling is such now that the reach that money provides for them is less and less and less. So even the candidates have less control; they have less influence in the process.
So what happens? The primary, because this is so focused around the primary process and the voters in the party selecting their candidate. What is the future given what the Democrats just did by circumventing the entire primary process and the political leadership and elite of a party forcing another candidate out and then handpicking because they're losing to pick somebody they believe can win? It may be one of the most brilliant things that a party has done in centuries, but what's that do to the process when we do that kind of action?
Well, I mean, first of all, you got to understand what were their choices before. I mean, you can make the argument that the process was such that choices were limited going into the primary process for the Democratic candidates. And any incumbent president's going to have a huge advantage over everybody else. I take it a little bit differently. I look at American politics as a free enterprise system, as a free market system. And what you saw on the Democratic side, you saw market adjustment. I mean, it's about, hey, we got to make an adjustment here. We're going to be non-competitive. Any business will make that pivot. And so that structure is there. And that was my comment when I look at the primary process, is that and this is not new. I want everybody to understand this is not new. This is not unique. If you go back to 1988, when Michael Dukakis got shellacked by George Bush, that there was a group of Democratic leaders that came together. One was named Bill Clinton. The other one was named Jim Hunt. The other one was named David Price out of Chapel Hill. And it was a combination of, actually, quite frankly, suburbs, more conservative-based Southern Democrats that said we have got to get away from these liberal New England policies and make our party more competitive on the presidential. We're going to continue to lose. They had lost 3 presidential cycles back to back, and in fact, in the last previous 6, they'd only won 1. And so they had a reassessment. So you saw Bill Clinton coming out with a welfare work to get off welfare type initiatives. And you saw that change. That's a reflection of the marketplace. And so when one side starts losing poorly, you expect the adjustment to take place. Because in politics, the only thing that matters is winning.
So that said, we have 7 states that are 4 weeks away from starting to vote. Early voting in Pennsylvania, Minnesota, a couple other states. Yet election day is, 2.5 months away. Image and intensity, better than anybody. Is there anything else that's going to impact that can they influence in this short window, image and intensity? And then can you speak to the impact of early voting, particularly if you're voting, that much before things that might come out to play right before election day? Does that make a difference?
It does. If it's very significant, I can speak to that in the 2020 U.S. Senate race and the difference that it made for Thom Tillis. Thom Tillis' margin of victory, in my opinion, would have been larger in 2020, but he still won. But that's because the issues with Cunningham broke after early voting had already started. People that vote early tend to already, are already sort of baked into the system. And actually, early voting, that will give you a little bit of insight. Early voting offers a segue in for operatives like me to help go out there and influence the vote. One of the things that we hadn't talked about is that we talk about the development of data models. So a little bit of history here. In Richard Burr in 2004 was first U.S. Senate candidate to use a micro-targeting model in a U.S. Senate race. Micro-targeting is now out the window. We do probability models. I talked to you about getting ready to go back in the field to do a model here shortly. Is that when election day, when early voting starts, depending on what data companies we're using, depending on what race, but like in a U.S. Senate race, I actually have a dashboard, and we have scored out voters. And we have scored out voters' probability of voting one way or the other way, voting and like in the Thom Tillis race, voting for Thom Tillis or voting for Cal Cunningham. And we have a little dot. We have a red dot and we have a blue dot for the first day. And then we have a gray dot. That gray dot are voters that voted who we had not scored out, who we don't know how we don't know how they behave. Once we get enough of a sample of voters who we have not scored out, we go in and we field them. We poll them again. Now we don't call them up and say, "Hey, we know that you just voted early, and want to know how you voted." We just let them know we're doing a survey, and we go back and rescore those voters. And so I can give you an example in the 2016 U.S. Senate race and the presidential, when everybody was tracking that race dead even, all the polling was showing the race dead even. We went back in and rescored the people that had not been scored out. They were overwhelmingly split voting Republican. In fact, we adjusted all of our data models into that. We had Burr tracking at about +4. We had Trump tracking at +3 in making that adjustment. So to early voting, whereas we talk about people showing up to vote, early voting gives campaigns an opportunity to go out there and gain new information that allows them time to go and recalibrate that. And the way we recalibrate that, this gets into the micro world, maybe a little bit more granular, but I'll give you an example. When the scandal broke on Thom Tillis, on Cal Cunningham in the Thom Tillis race in 2020, that happened on Friday night. Tillis had called me. We'd had a debate on Thursday. On Friday evening, he called me. He had tested positive for COVID. So I got to tell the other campaign that hey, we were with you last night. We had COVID situation. I got to tell the media outlets. I got to tell them all this before we break the story. The Cunningham campaign used that as an opportunity to hope to bury a bad story about the scandals. On Saturday morning, when the scandal story broke, on Saturday morning, I'm telling my data team, pull for me every person who has not voted, who is undecided or voting for Cal Cunningham, who is in the moral cluster universe of voters. And we had text messages going out to them that afternoon with links to the news articles that were being broken. And then we had mail was literally being delivered to post offices on Monday, going to that universe of voters. And so we started a whole conversation, a micro conversation with a group of voters we felt like we had an opportunity to influence around that. And then it expanded to veterans and everything else. My point is that the early voting, whereas, media, they want to talk about the influences of, well, people are showing out, whatever. The fact is, early voting, people that tend to go vote early have already made up their minds. Those that we have not scored out, it gives us an opportunity to go in there and learn more about them and how we can help recalibrate the race if we need to.
As you do that, one of the things that we're hearing right now is Vice President Harris has avoided interviews with the media. And the question is how long she can do that. I would argue maybe up till election day, because what's the benefit? So if that's the case, do you think that she will interview with the media if it's not really that prevalent and helpful? And then the corollary is, do you envision that Harris and Trump will debate? And if you can, what's the opportunity and what's the risk for each candidate to do so?
One is I believe they will debate. They'll have that debate, and the risk is going to be for Trump is that Trump. In the only presidential debate we had is that Joe Biden's poor performance actually made Trump look rational and reasonable to the average voter. and he was very reserved, and people can talk about the fact checks or whatever they're saying and all of that, but that plays out. So the optics of the debates are going to be very important. In Trump 2020, Joe Biden in the first debate, Trump did very poorly. We saw our numbers crash. He recovered into the third debate. In the 2016 debates against Hillary Clinton, he did a very masterful job in handling her, and people were not expecting that. So the expectations, I mean, there's going to be a wide range of expectations, and the risk are going to be, it could be a make it or break event for either side. That's the risk on these debates. From a standpoint of media, and I actually had a conversation with a New York Times reporter yesterday, and we were talking about the relevancy of what they write. The fact of the matter is that Kamala Harris does not have to do another media interview. The expectation of doing media interviews is being driven by reporters. It's not being driven by the public. And that's because they're trying to sell ads on their business, their corporations. Understand that. I mean, they are. And the judge of a good news story today for a media outlet is the number of clicks it generates. And the reason why the number of clicks it generates is important because that means the number of ads that are on the platform. I actually told a reporter, I mean, this is in the 2022 cycle. I had a reporter kept calling me about Donald Trump this, Donald Trump that. And I said, the only thing you guys want to write about is Donald Trump because those stories generate more clicks for you. He called me back a couple of days later. He said, I went back and pulled all these because my editors are always telling me follow this narrative. I went back and pulled the analytics. And he said every story I've written that had Trump in the headline had more engagement than any story I had not over the last 2 years. And so media outlets are looking to build engagement because that's where their revenue comes from today. And so they want Kamala Harris to do the media interviews. They want to have that space.
Gotcha. So, and just as a sidebar on that, the vice presidential candidates announced they'll debate October 1st. Does the Waltz Vance debate create anything other than, daytime or nighttime drama that'll last about 20 minutes?
It creates opportunities for folks like us to get together and talk about stuff that's not really relevant.
Right. So nobody will really care except their parents or kids watching.
Well, it goes back to like speculation about Roy Cooper being on the ballot, what impact it'd have in North Carolina or Shapiro in Pennsylvania. And my point is that John Edwards was on the ballot and it had no impact in North Carolina. A guy named Al Gore was on the ballot as vice president, also as the president, and he didn't carry his own home state where he'd been a U.S. senator from. So yeah, the vice president, we vote for presidents. We don't vote for vice presidents.
Mm-hmm. Another quick one, just dropping down the ticket at least a level. Any insights on the AG race with the two congressmen, Jeff Jackson and Dan Bishop?
Right now,
I give
advantage to Bishop. I give advantage to Bishop because the overall political environment, one, favors Republicans. Two is that keep in mind I talk about the border issue on law and order. And I've actually probed a little bit more depth. I don't want to go into that, but law and order issues are very, very important to these unaffiliated suburban-based voters. We've used, and so I have used the immigration issue in Wake County-based races and also Mecklenburg County-based races because it plays very well with suburban women who have concerns over security. And so I give the advantage to Bishop right now, but there's been no spending. There's been no narrative being set for that. But quite frankly, it's going to be a tough haul for Jeff Jackson to try to get noticed and try to break out because not only does he have the dynamics we talked about in advertising, but he's got a political win at his face, not at his back.
So kind of maybe getting close to the last questions. We're getting close where we need to wrap up. What do you think Trump needs to do to win the day? And what does Harris need to do to win the day?
Trump needs to do exactly what he should have done in 2020. That was to be quiet and talk about issues in his record and play upon the business. In fact, I mean, that's what he has to do. If he can stay away from the personal narrative, he can lose this thing by making this about personalities and making this personal. Keep the focus on the issues. The problem for Harris, the challenge that Harris has, is that Harris has an issue set that voters don't like, and that's their record. And she's going to have to be able to set a level of trust and confidence in that. Now, and that's critical to what I said about Trump. She may not be able to do that herself, but if Trump stays on the personal narrative, not the issue narrative, he may do it for her. And that's not unusual. That is
Sure.
not unusual.
Well, and is Trump capable of doing that? Because look at the going into the RNC. I mean, not a huge Trump supporter, just in full disclosure, but a brilliant job of saying, okay, I'm going to quit yelling at people, not call everybody nasty names. And he did it for the first 4 days, and then he gets to the end, and now he's right back to doing that nonsense, which turns, I think, a lot of people off.
Well, but that goes back to what Frank Luntz was saying. But however, I will say, first of all, I know the people around the Trump campaign very well, worked with them, and you consistently hear the stories of talking about how they've had the script, they've had the speech. When he's using a teleprompter and he's staying on message, that's where he needs to do. He needs to stay on message with what the people around him are giving, and divorce himself of his personal tendencies to deviate. So, as a consultant and an operative, I have had clients that I see walk out on the stage. I have no concern and worry about what they're going to say. I have others, I hold my breath every time they open their mouth. And that's not, that's not unique.
On the flip side of that coin, same issue with Harris is she's now trying to take ownership that I can, quote, fix the problems of exorbitant gasoline prices, exorbitant food costs, mortgage rates that have doubled and tripled. And yet she's been the second most highly elected people. Maybe it's because the vice president, like you said, nobody listens to. But how does she divorce herself that she's had 3.5 years to help do that? And they're part of the reason that went that way. Can she divorce herself and be the fixer?
That goes back to what I said early in this process, Jeff, and that is the bar is much higher for Harris than it is for Trump, because Trump has got right now. If you look at who's best able to fix the border, it's Donald Trump. Who's best able to fix the economy? It's Donald Trump. What Harris has got to do is for these voters, for the swing voters who don't trust either side, and they think both sides are lying to them. She has got to state the case is take me at my word. And they're not inclined to want to take them in. Whereas Trump can say, look, you may not like a lot of this stuff, but when it comes down to making your life better as it relates to fixing grocery store prices, as it relates to fixing the economy, and as it relates to securing the border, I'm committed to doing that. And that's the strength of the Trump. The whole strength of the foundation of Trump's candidacy is about put America first. And that the challenge and the problem, the bigger challenge for Kamala Harris, I'm gonna go back to the Democratic Party, is to fight the Democratic Party. And this is not enough attention put on. It's between the liberals and the radicals. Oh, and understand the issue set of what she has to put forth out there to win the middle is going to be counterintuitive to the emerging base of the Democratic Party, which is the radical left. And that is a reality of American politics. And it's not being discussed, but you're seeing it. The reason why you have the Democratic erosion, it's not that they're dying out, they're becoming unaffiliated. Because as the party goes further to the left, the moderates are dropping out and unaffiliated are becoming more moderate in this state. That's the same thing that happened to Republicans when, after the 92 presidential race, when we had a fight between the economic conservatives and social conservatives, all the pro-choice Republican women left the party. They became unaffiliated. We went from going up to 38% registration to a complete slide down to 30. It was because as the party went further right, those that didn't fit that mantra are moved into the unaffiliated. I use a guy named Bob Orr, who's the first Republican to win a statewide judicial race. He's an unaffiliated today now.
Right. Supreme Court justice.
That's right. And so that's taking place. That's the problem with Kamala Harris, is that what she has to go to on the issue set is inconsistent with where the core base of her party is today.
The kind of last thing to kind of touch on, and it's the phenomena of the unaffiliates and the current constitutional structure. It's the magic 272, right? Electoral votes. Is a third party, could the unaffiliates ever organize as a legitimate third party if they keep swinging, or will they join a party? Because the two parties, it's not possible, I don't think, to see a third party win in an electoral college structure. Is that a fair statement? Or
well, first of all, the unaffiliated can never organize a party because they can never agree on anything from one election to the next. Okay. They're a third on any issue at any point in time. And that's
So
who
they're
they
across the whole ideological
That's
spectrum.
right. So they have that's right. And so what's going to be their platform? You know, we're for
Everything.
this today. We're for this today, but we may be against it tomorrow.
Maybe
All
they
right?
are the perfect party because we're for everything.
Yeah. Yeah. But here's the thing. Let's look at it differently. I look at it totally different. Is that elections have been won and lost historically in this country by building coalitions with other voting groups. In North Carolina, the foundation of North Carolina for Republicans to win was to build a coalition with conservative Democrats. Back a guy who lives in North Mecklenburg today, or like Mooresville, actually Jim Martin, so he's across the lake.
Right.
You know, he had more Democrats vote for him in the first race for governor than they did Republicans. Function of math, what you had to do to win. So what both sides have to do, here's what they need to do, is they need to reach out for the coalition. That's what I talked about, is that if you want to be smart about this, if you want to look at how you make yourself competitive, you're better off growing your primary voting base with these people who are eligible, who can participate to help mold and shape a better product for the general election, because ultimately the goal is to win the general so you can govern and do the things that you want to do. And so, quite frankly, the unaffiliates to me they're going to provide a good equilibrium balance for two entities that tend to want to go off to the extremes. It's going to start to provide that equilibrium balance. That's a function of math, because right now, Donald Trump can't win this state. Mark Robinson can't win this state unless they build and win a majority of the unaffiliated voters. That's not an opinion. That's a function of mathematics. And math is a reality of life. It's the same thing in your business, same thing in your home family budget. And so you can throw look, a lot of people want to throw math out the window, and those are the ones that end up in financial scrapes. Okay. All right. But the fact of the matter is that you can't win neither side can win without forming that coalition with the unaffiliated in the middle. So we're not in a bad spot.
Well, my 7th grade math teacher would love you.
Well,
but I tell you,
I would hope it'd be a high school math. You know, I mean, 7th grade math is, I know a lot of people are going to do 7th grade math.
Well, we're kind of at the end of the hour. I tell you, my day is always better when I get to spend time with you and learn what's going on in the political realm. It is a fascinating perspective, and I love the data analytics aspect of it. So with that, Paul, we totally appreciate you taking the time to educate us and share and help us understand the political realm of things going on. And I'm going to turn it back to Bill. So, Paul, again, thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm always glad to spend time in my favorite chamber in the state. So.
Paul, that was fascinating. I enjoyed listening to it myself. And yesterday we had Mark Robinson, of course, at a luncheon, the Republican candidate. We had Josh Stein back in May, both offering their visions for our state. Jeff has coordinated whoever wins that election is coming back next year as governor and going to be speaking to the Chamber of Commerce. And then Jeff, come in October, we'll be having the candidate forums. So we'll have some of our state elected candidates coming before us. I'll remind everybody, on Tuesday, October the 8th, we have our Chamber of Business Expo that will be allowing us to do show and tell for our business community. Again, thank you, Nicole Burton and the folks at Novant Health for being our presenting sponsor. And everybody have a great weekend.